And welcome back, folks, to Truth versus News Incorporated here on July 6th. I'm here with Jim Petcher and Scott Bennett. And why are we here? Because of the fact that America is ruled by lies and that truth is completely absent. And American population tolerates it. Ruled by lies is the American way, and when truth is politicized, all is lost. I've said this for the last half year, waiting for somebody to tell me I'm full of, but no, it looks like America has got a fundamental problem here when we have some bad politicians still walking the streets and things.
Well, you may be full of it, Don, but not in that specific regard.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we have the LA City Council approving the first step in replacing the LAPD with community responders for nonviolent calls. The Los Angeles City Council Tuesday approved the first step in a plan to replace LAPD officers with community-based unarmed emergency responders for nonviolent calls for service. What happens when the nonviolent call goes violent? Thus is the dawn of a new era of public safety in LA, said City Council member Herb Wesson, co-author of the motion. The bottom line is the way things have been going is not working for our communities. This last month has made that crystal clear. We have a responsibility to listen to our people, and our people have spoken. Well, I don't know of any referendum or any vote that would allow the people to speak on this issue. The City Council is just going forward in blind disregard for history. This is obviously not the result of experienced police officers who know that the situations are far more complex and that what are supposed to be nonviolent calls frequently turn violent, which means a number of social workers are going to die as a consequence. The motion for the crisis response team was presented by Wesson and Council President Nuri Martinez on June 16th, following protests in the city over the in-custody death of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers, which, however, was completely fraudulent and fake, where they put him in custody and handcuffs into the police car. And when he got in, he had a hair on his head and handcuffed behind his back. And when they took him out, lying on the ground, he no longer had any hair, was no longer handcuffed. In fact, it wasn't even George Floyd. It was a Sigma 7 medical dummy they used there to fake all this. And now we have police forces abandoning their past practice. The motion instructs the LAPD to work with the county's Department of Mental Health, Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, and other government agencies to respond to nonviolent incidents such as drug abuse or incidents related to mental health. Well, that looks like a really promising program. Meanwhile, AOC, defund the police, means they really want to defund the police. The left's darling is not impressed by de Blasio's press conference about taking $1 billion out of the NYPD budget. It isn't enough. You remember AOC, do you not? She's been crowded out of the news lately, but she's determined to get right back into it. We haven't heard much from her in the last 6 months. Impeachment, Super Tuesday, the rise and mental decline of Biden, coronavirus, now Antifa, BLM riots have edged her out. That doesn't mean Alexandria won't shoulder her way back in, especially when issues near to her dear Socialist of America heart are at work. Defunding police means defunding police, the Democrat said in a statement to Gotham Gazette. It does not mean budget tricks or funny math. It does not mean moving school police officers from the NYPD budget to the Department of Education's budget so the exact same police remain in schools. It does not mean counting overtime cuts as cuts, even as NYPD ignores every attempt by the city council to curb overtime spending and overspends on overtime anyway. It doesn't mean hiring more police officers while cutting more than $800 million from NY schools. God, no, we don't want more police officers because that would mean less crime. Yeah. If these reports are accurate, then these proposed cuts are a disingenuous illusion, she said. This is not a victory. The fight to defund police and increase crime continues. Meanwhile, the Seattle police in riot gear move in to reclaim their precinct in CHOP, formerly Chaz, arresting more than a dozen persons after the Mayo issues a 2 a.m. executive order to vacate the zone, which has seen 2 deadly shootings in 3 weeks and crime rise by at least 500%. Seattle police Wednesday moved in to reclaim their precinct in the city's occupied protest zone after the city's mayor issued a 2 a.m. executive order. More than a dozen people were arrested, which had seen 2 deadly shootings in 3 weeks. People have occupied several blocks around a park in the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct for about 2 weeks. Police abandoned the building following clashes with protesters calling for an end to police brutality. Calling the gathering at the East Precinct in Cal Anderson Park an unlawful assembly, Mayor Jenny Durkin had demanded all barriers removed after what was actually a 525% spike in violent crime in the area. An eyewitness said the Seattle police basically reclaimed the district in less than 30 minutes, 5 feet at a time, with motorcycle officers out in front. President Trump has repeatedly criticized the Seattle protest area, as well as city and state leaders. He tweeted Monday morning, the protesters have zero respect for government. Meanwhile, a St. Louis prosecutor says she may overrule the police and charge a lawyer couple who brandished firearms at protesters outside their mansion after they said they feared for our lives. I thought this was a fundamental right of an American citizen to defend themselves if they're in fear for their life. St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kimberly Gardner, however, apparently sees things differently, announcing she's working with police and prosecutors to investigate the lawyers for possible threats against the crowd. This woman is a disgrace. She doesn't belong in office. We saw the crowd pouring onto their property. That was trespass. It was illegal. They were threatening to burn down the house to kill their dog and kill them too. This woman is disgusting. Meanwhile, Walmart pulls All Lives Matter shirts from stores after a leftist backlash. How bad is this? Leftist activists are now trying to cancel Walmart after discovering the retailer sells t-shirts that say All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. The retailer had been selling them on their website and in Walmart Canadian stores, but leftists accused the company of mocking the Black Lives Matter movement and battling the struggles of African Americans. Well, God knows they can tell us exactly what to do every aspect of our lives. God knows Walmart shouldn't be selling anything of which they do not personally approve. In response, Walmart Canada announced last week it would review its All Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter selections and pull all available shirts from its website. This is just disgusting beyond belief. Sure. Meanwhile, NASCAR ratings hit a broadcast low after the news fiasco. This was a completely staged event where a little hand pull to open and close the garage door was treated as though it were some kind of hate crime, where the noose was that the hand pull was actually pulled down and replaced with a retied, something looking more like a noose, but the whole thing was ridiculous. It had no basis, and NASCAR has participated in the cover-up. No hate crime. It was a fraud. It was a faux hate crime, and NASCAR is complicit. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, the NASCAR rating is gone down. I mean, people aren't going to be watching this. They're not going to be entertaining this. They understand it's propaganda. They're not going to be buying into the Black Lives Matter more than White Lives Matter or any other lives matter. So people are turning it off. And this this district attorney who's threatening to prosecute the people who were standing up for their property rights, of course, that won't go anywhere. That won't happen. I think you'd see federal intervention in prosecuting her for deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S. Code 241. And they should immediately sue her for 42 U.S.C. 1983. You're depriving these people their rights to exercise their Second Amendment right to protect their life, liberty, and property. It's very cut and dry. They were on their property. There was a threat a violent threat, destroyed their property, came uninvited, were trespassing. All of the elements are there for American citizens to defend their property with firearms. So there's nothing that can be prosecutable. However, this is, of course, part of the left's agenda. They are going to try and quicken the prosecution of anyone who steps out with a firearm that affirms their rights. So in a sense, this is already civil war. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and their agenda to defund the police is to create chaos and anarchy, again, so that they can erect this communist, Marxist, authoritarian, fascist state. That's at the heart of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and they have to create, chaos, and they do that by removing the police. Here's one thing that Trump needs to do, Jim. Trump needs to give an executive order that says, for all of you policemen that are being defunded, that are being fired, that are being removed, or that are quitting, I'm writing an executive order that your ability to keep and bear arms, to carry a firearm as a police officer, is hereby protected under executive order. He should do the same for military, and he should, in fact, do the same for all former police, military, and all citizens who want to do it, want to exercise their Second Amendment. But he should specifically capitalize on the defund the police and the anti-police rhetoric by saying, I stand with the police, and every police officer that is retiring or is not being hired or is being fired by the left, I want you to continue to protect yourselves and your communities, and your right to keep and bear arms is hereby enshrined as an executive order, so you are not going to be forbidden from carrying a firearm. That's a very important political advantage that Trump can capitalize on, because the other thing to understand is fear is the restraint for criminal predators. Fear of the police, fear of getting shot, fear is what restrains the criminal predators from going out on the hunt and abusing people. There is no fear in an unarmed mental health clinic bureaucrat. And what you said earlier, Jim, the fact that you're shifting out of a fear-based police system to this kumbaya government worker, let's all get along, community enhancement group or whatever, it's going to result in a lot of bureaucrats getting killed, shot. You're only going to add to the boldness of the criminal predators because they are not restrained by anything except fear. There is no love or compassion or empathy in the heart of a criminal predator, violent thug, racist, whatever you want to call them. They are dominated by ego, narcissism, selfish lust, power. They are consumed with the darkest maniaces and bloodlust in the human heart. As God says, the heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? And by removing the police, you're letting this dark wickedness just come out like a fountain, and it's going to infect large amounts of people where the wicked congregate. It's going to expand. It's like lancing a boil. All that poison is going to spread out, and without the police there. So that's the psychology behind why the police are necessary, because the fear of a police officer is what restrains and retards the aggressive, animalistic, bloodlust violence of both the mob and the individual predator criminals. And there's nothing else that can tame and control and restrain that. Not cookies, not kumbaya songs, not new clothes, not free houses, not nothing. That is a that is a pathology and a ruin of a large part of the population when they go into this violent criminal areas and the violent criminal mentality, whether it's gang members, MS-13, covered in tattoos. We've seen what they do, the drug running cartels, chopping up women in horrific, monstrous torture, videos and assassinations. Those are inhuman. Those are demoniacs. And the only way to combat demoniacs is, of course, with spiritual warfare, but also buckled with the Second Amendment right. So I would say Trump needs to make a executive order during this time of Congress when everybody's out on vacation over August. He needs to say, my fellow Americans, every police officer, and have a whole bunch of cops behind him, have the Fraternal Order of Police, have the VFW, have all these people that have inherent authority and training behind him saying, we will continue to protect our communities. And I am writing executive order that recognizes their power to keep and bear arms and their power to be deputized at a moment's notice to defend against the mobs that are tearing down statues. And Trump should use these statues as another illustration. They beheaded Christopher Columbus this weekend. Trump needs to take advantage of these and say, no, what they did this weekend on the 4th of July, we're never tolerating that again. And we're getting creative and asymmetric in how we attack these domestic terrorists. We're going on the hunt after them. We're not responding to them. We're going after them through police, retired soldiers that are recognized by my executive order as still defending the Constitution, which they all swore an oath to do. I think he'd have enormous public support. And if he doesn't do it, Jim, I fear his lead with the retard Biden is only going to crumble. He has to get bold and aggressive and shut this down. And it's not through police. It's through American citizens. It has to be grassroots based, citizenry based. So grassroots individuals, grassroots police, grassroots militias in their own towns, in their own communities, in their own cities, they need to rise up. And it can't be, a good old boy sort of, hee-haw thing. It has to be a balanced and work with the churches and things like that. It has to be seen as a combination of healing and a police force within the citizenry. Jim?
Scott, I like it. I mean, how many of these social workers are going to have to be killed going on in response to these nonviolent complaints before the city council realizes it's a catastrophe? They're going to refuse to respond to the calls.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stupidity beyond belief. Unreal. Don, your thoughts?
Oh, I was going to say amen to what Scott has said. What can I add? But yes, we got to stand up for the rights and know the Constitution, get a little bit of education into what this country really is supposed to be all about, and and you'll see how it's deteriorated into the chaos and anarchy and tyranny that is being imposed on us. And we just got to get it back on track, or else we've lost our country.
Scott, let me return. I take it that these Antifa people are displaying their arms in greater force and frequency today, which seems to me to be a direct confrontation with law enforcement, which they want to disband so there's no one there who can regulate or control them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right, but there's also a weirdness to this whole Antifa, left-wing, Black Lives Matter carrying weapons, because again, if you're not trained, if you haven't went through the military, you don't have the mental, physical, muscle memory, instincts, and awareness. You're simply playing a part like an actor in an actor's studio or a crisis actor. There's something very strange about these videos of the Black Lives Matter leftists carrying weapons, covered in uniform, military, looking like Navy SEALs out of a video game. They're not trained in proper tactics and operations and such like that. So for that reason, I have absolutely no fear about it, because they would be a flash in the pan. And at the moment that these leftist Black Lives Matter, Antifa types started a shooting war, I think they would be just annihilated, because they don't know tactical operations, and they're just they're like the lunatics that shoot their guns in the air just to scare people. What they don't realize is somebody else is going to have a gun on them and put them down with one shot. but there is a growing media presence of a lot of these left-wing Black Lives Matter being videotaped, going down the streets with firearms and stuff like that in an attempt to intimidate the population. And it is a declaration of civil war, even if it's not, meant to be such. So this is I think this is a setup for what could be perceived as part two in the end of the summertime, just right around Labor Day. You could have a false flag event, a psyop, where you have a group of these black clad left wing Antifa types engaged in a shooting war, or what seems to be a shooting war, with police districts, or civilians or something like that. I think that's their next agenda, is to actually try and trigger copycat movements of utilizing weapons for some of these political objectives.
Scott, do we have a video that exemplifies what you're talking about?
Yeah, Don can play it if you have it, Don.
In a second. There we go. Hear that?
Notice the police light down at the end of the road.
I'm your worst nightmare, brother. Hey, once you go in there and sit that comedy and shit. This ain't the one you want to talk to, bro. We ain't no Black Lives Matter. We ain't none of that bullshit. Go ahead, sit on. We're Black Militia. It's your worst nightmare. Go ahead. We're Black Militia, bro. Let me talk to the mic for a minute. What are you? I just told you what I was. What are you? What are you is the question. Everywhere you go, you invade, steal, rape, rob, and kill us. Oh, really? Then you steal people's culture. Then you have to have an attitude about it. Where's our reparations?
Where's our reparations? Give me a break.
Great. Okay, let me
Was that the whole of it?
stop
No.
on me.
On this,
Go ahead.
these individuals identify themselves as Black Militia. He says, we're not Black Lives Matter. We're not none of that shit. We're Black Militia. We're your worst nightmare.
Oh,
And where's our reparations? Every place, the white man's gone. He's raped and destroyed and killed and just, blown stuff up and whatever. And so he's in this confrontation. Look at the uniforms of these people. They're absolute full black uniforms. These are uniforms that you buy or you get in the military, but they're dressed to the hilt. They're not wearing jeans and t-shirts. They're dressed for militant black operations, black clad. And the police cars at the end of the road, in the very beginning of the video, you'll see the camera pan down to the right. Look closely to the flashing red and blue lights. That shows a police presence is there. So this is not a lonely, isolated incident. These are police present. Now, is that a false flag? Is this a psyop? Is this a dress rehearsal? Is this fully known? Is this meant to traumatize people? We'll see, but just pay attention to all the details. Here we go.
I'm your worst nightmare, brother. Hey, once you go in there and sit that comedy and shit. This ain't the one you want to talk to, bro. We ain't no Black Lives Matter. We ain't none of that bullshit. Go ahead, sit on. We're Black Militia. It's your worst nightmare. Go ahead. We're Black Militia, bro. Let me talk to the mic for a minute. What are you? I just told you what I was. What are you? What are you in question? Everywhere you go, you invade, steal, rape, rob, and kill us. Then you steal people's culture. Then you have to have an attitude about it. Where's our reparations? Thank you. Of course, I like the song.
He's carrying 2 rifles, Scott.
nationality before you lose your life. Fuck out my face.
Thanks for that, Scott. Meanwhile, we have the left-wing CHOP, formerly Chaz Zone, responsible for a 525% spike in Seattle crime, as we previously observed. Following weeks of violence and chaos, CHOP was finally dismantled by Seattle police, but only after occupiers marched on Mayor Duncan's 5,000 square foot, $7.6 million house. Sounds like a mansion to me. For almost the entirety of June, the area was plagued with fights, bickering, robberies, and rapes, with occupiers targeting both outsiders and each other. It's now emerged, compared to the same time period last year, from June 2nd to June 30th, there was a 525% jump in crime. The figure is even greater than the 300% number repeatedly cited by Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best. Rather embarrassingly, after proclaiming a summer of love and telling President Trump, Seattle is fine, so don't be so afraid of democracy, Mayor Duncan was forced to acknowledge the numbers in her own emergency order. The order states there were 22 additional incidents in person-related crime in the area, to include 2 additional homicides, 6 additional robberies, 16 additional aggravated assaults, including 2 additional non-fatal shootings. In other words, a commune that was built in the name of opposing violence and brutality led directly to a massive increase in violence and brutality. So much for the tolerant left. Meanwhile, Wisconsin college students right here in my hometown of Madison demand the Lincoln statue be torn down, not because he was anti-slavery, because he wasn't sufficiently pro-black. This is unbelievable. The statue has sat on the school's picturesque Bascom Hill for over 100 years, but radically liberal students want it to be removed because of statements Lincoln made about racial equality. He was also very publicly anti-black, said Nala McWhorter, the president of UW-Madison's Black Student Union. Just because he was anti-slavery doesn't mean he was pro-black. This is embarrassingly bad.
Yeah.
Like the chancellor has been reasonable. Becky Blank said, like all those of all presidents, Lincoln's legacy is complex and contains actions which 150 years later appeared flawed. However, when the totality of his tenure is considered, Lincoln is widely acknowledged as one of our greatest presidents, having issued the Emancipation Proclamation, persuaded Congress to adopt the 13th Amendment ending slavery, and preserve the Union during the Civil War. Meanwhile, we have an exclusive and op-ed from General Flynn. If we don't act, 2% of the people are about to control the other 98%. Unlike this, I was once told if we're not careful, 2% of the passionate will control 98% of the indifferent 100% of the time.
Right.
The more I've thought about this phrase, the more I believe it. There's now a small group of passionate people working hard to destroy our American way of life. Treason and treachery are rampant, and our rule of law and those of law enforcement are in jeopardy. I believe the attacks being presented today are part of a well-orchestrated, well-funded effort that uses racism as its sword to aggravate our battlefield dispositions. This weapon is used to leverage and legitimize violence and crime, not to seek or serve the truth. The dark forces weapons formed against us serve one purpose: to promote radical social change through power and control. Socialism and the creation of a socialist society are their ultimate goals. They are also intent on driving God out of our families, our schools, and our courts. They even seek the very removal of God from our churches, essentially hoping to remove God from our everyday lives. Remember, that we will only remain united as one nation under God. I think he's got it right, Scott, that the real targets are the Constitution and the U.S. Bill of Rights. Your thoughts?
Well, General Flynn's article is very insightful, and all of us agree with it and are seeing this play out. We're seeing a far left Marxist, communist, atheist party of anger and violence, of division and chaos, breaking up and morphing into multiple cancers, metastasizing into Black Lives Matter, and you've got the Antifa anarchists capitalizing and harnessing the Black Lives Matter mission. Some blacks are paying attention and waking up to that. Most are not. Most are still dumb and delusional in their thuggery of it's all the white man's fault that I'm poor and dumb as a bag of rocks and haven't succeeded and are full of drugs and broken families and on welfare the rest of my life. There are some people like that. Then there are more successful ones, like aside from the criminal war crimes of international dimensions, like Condoleezza Rice or Colin Powell or Larry Elders is a great Fox News contributor, or Candace Owens. I can't imagine anybody than Candace Owens. We don't even consider them black, as they don't consider us white. We consider them articulate, intelligent, reasonable people that love the
American
country.
citizens like ourselves.
Yes, yeah, we consider them American citizens, and that's where it's sad, Jim, because the scum of humanity, that you have white scum and black scum and all that, but you have a large degree of the scum of humanity rising up in this Black Lives Matter movement of chaos and anarchy and violence and shootings from Minneapolis to Chicago to New York, that are giving and defining the blacks in this country as an almost animal, Neanderthal, troglodyte, group that is just full of bloodlust and hate. And what they've tried to change over 100 years is suddenly being reset back to even before slavery times. They're being seen as a pathological maniac and a disease and a violence in this country, in this culture. By the video we just saw, black militias walking down the street, threatening drivers, calling them I'm your worst nightmare, bro. Get out of here before you lose your life. Those are fighting words. Those what wars are started over. But it's very sad to see. I know how it ends. You have all of those type of people eliminated by those who do know tactical operations and how to shoot. I hope it doesn't go that way. But General Flynn has an interesting opportunity too, Jim. He seems to be getting his second wind. And we've said it for a long time that General Flynn has to emerge from this fiery furnace from which he was thrown into, as many of us have been by the Obama Democrat fascists. He was thrown into a prison environment, except he was spared prison. But he was traumatized, his family traumatized. He was bankrupted. He was betrayed by Covington and Burling, the lawyers that represented both Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer, the Department of Justice, and Union Bank of Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia, and all sorts of international stuff. They went after Flynn because of what he knew at DIA, and he's suddenly emerging with all of that articulated from Sidney Powell, who met with me and was given all of this material, and effectively had a discussion with Jack Flynn and General Flynn about the material that I had given her, and then weaponized it into a legal maneuver of disclosing everything that Covington had done and failed to do. And when she did that, it immediately caused the Department of Justice to recognize they would be exposed for their incestuous relationship with Covington, and they dropped the case. But General Flynn now has an obligation and a duty and a mission as an American soldier, and indeed as an American patriot, to go on a barnstorming tour and really become louder and bolder and more ferocious into attacking the deep state, attacking the liars and the hypocrites and the traitors, and exposing all of it. And he needs to do a very simple, very quick book that says, something like Exposed, the hijacking and tyranny of the American government, what they did to me, they did to you, or something like that, where he goes on unapologetically and says, look, I don't care what your politics are. I do care about the law and the government being used and weaponized against people like me. If they can do it against me, a 30-year military general that swore an oath to this country, that had a top secret SCI clearance like I did, and served this country, if they come down upon me with nothing but lies, they can come down upon everybody. And we can't survive that. And that's why Americans need to be so outraged that they tear down everything that has the name CNN and MSNBC, and they tear down everything that says the Democrat National Committee and Democrat Party, because these are not pro-American groups. These are fascist propagandists that are still pissed off because Trump won, and they've invented nothing but hoaxes and lies ever since. So I think Flynn goes on the attack and does that. It would be one of the greatest things that he could ever do, but it would also be beneficial to the president. Jim?
Scott, I think you got it exactly right. He's a great American. They had to get him out because he could see through the smoke and mirrors. He wouldn't have allowed Trump to be played by bullshit. They feared that. Now they're trying to tell us COVID-19 is 10 times more infectious than it was at the beginning of the pandemic. It's become clear the virus is not going to kill more than 50 million people like the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 to 1920 did. So far, the death toll has surpassed 500,000. More will keep dying every day. However, millions of people die from various diseases every single year. According to the WHO, the flu kills between 209,000 and 650,000 people every year, but we don't shut down the country because of that. Yet, yes, COVID-19 is more serious than the flu, or so the author believes. Actually, it's not even reasonable to derive that conclusion. It's not even as serious. At the worst, it's equal to, but not more serious than, the seasonal flu. But there's absolutely no reason it should be paralyzing our society at this point. In a newly released article, Ron Paul does a great job summarizing the hysteria we're currently witnessing. Unfortunately, our mainstream media is only interested in pushing the party line. So the good news that millions more have been exposed, while the fatality rate continues to decline, meaning the virus is getting weaker, is buried under hysterical false reporting of new cases. Unfortunately, many governors, including our own here in Texas, are incapable of resisting the endless lies of the mainstream media. They are putting Americans again through the nightmare of forced business closures, mandated face masks, and restrictions of constitutional liberties based on false propaganda. In Texas, the second wave propaganda has got so bad, the leaders of the 4 major hospitals in Houston took the extraordinary step last week of holding a joint press conference to clarify that the scare stories of Houston hospitals being overwhelmed with COVID cases are simply untrue, i.e. false. Dr. Mark Boom of Houston Methodist said the reporting on hospital capacity is misleading. He said, quite frankly, we're concerned there's a level of alarm in the community that is unwarranted right now.
It seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
I didn't quite get that. Can I hear that one more time? I'm serious. I could not tell what you just said.
From the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
Still didn't quite get that, but Dr. Samadi went to medical school. He's been listening to doctors all of his life. Doctor, I believe the headline from the World Health Organization is asymptomatic people are not infectious. They're not going to spread the disease. Is that what the WHO is saying?
Yes, that's correct, Greg. Look, you and I have been going at this since February of this year. We've covered more than hundreds of these segments on Newsmax TV. The most important segment about what we're going to be talking about COVID is probably tonight, because they're taking a 360-degree turn, and WHO is announcing, and this is a big news, that asymptomatic people out there are not contagious. Remember, because we didn't know who would be passing this virus or not, we made everybody do something called social distancing. This is a new word that you've heard of it, and it came to our life a few months ago. We made everybody across the board to wear masks. At the beginning, we said if you have symptoms, you wear the mask to protect others, and then we gave in because CDC and everybody kept changing back and forth. We also made everybody to go for testing. We need 300 million tests the next day, or else we cannot reopen our country. And guess what? This thing, this is very important. It's a breaking news that if you are not symptomatic, and you don't have any symptoms of fever, chills, shortness of breath, or any of those symptoms we've spoken about, the risk of passing it on to other people and being contagious is very rare. And studies like this comes from a very accurate tracing in countries like Singapore, contact tracing, and it's too bad that these researchers are not, the papers are not making it to Lancet, and mainstream media is not covering to the extent. This is probably one of the biggest news that we've had since coronavirus outbreak.
Data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
Nice to hear the truth. Meanwhile, psychologists begin a push to classify individuals resisting coronavirus edicts as mentally ill. A study published in the Journal of Social Psychology and Personality Science is attempting to stigmatize those with the courage to stand up against the mob during the coronavirus mania. On March 31st, 2020, Dr. Deborah Birx, a coordinator of the U.S. government's coronavirus task force, said, "There's no magic bullet. There's no magic vaccine or therapy. It's just behaviors. Each of our behaviors translate into something that changes the course of this viral pandemic over the next 30 days. My experience as a psychological scientist, as well as a practicing psychologist, has convinced me that the importance of psychology and behavior in the prevention and management of a wide range of health problems is enormous," said study author Pavel S. Blagoff, who worked as an associate professor director with a personality lab at Whitman College. This includes personality, or the study of important ways in which people differ. It was clear from reports in the media very early on, some people were rejecting advice to socially distance and engage in increased hygiene. There could be many reasons for this. I believe personality may at least play a small role. His own preconceived political notions and political biases, however, drive the findings of his study, which is meant to demonize opponents of extreme government overreach, where the new norm becomes to obey. We have a brain blocker, satellite tracking, chip implants, a muzzle mask, social distancing stents, or a rubber spine, no gender, endless vaccines, mandatory phone tracking, vaccine ID, travel license, social score, digital wallet. Unbelievably shameful. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think what we're witnessing, Jim, that's how democracy and freedom and liberty dies, of course, is you're labeling those who affirm liberty and affirm the Constitution and affirm their freedoms and don't bow down, don't surrender it. They are now being labeled, or in the beginning process of being labeled, mentally ill. We've seen this in science fiction books and films, and this is how it starts. Never mind that the Psychological Association removed the mental illness category for those who want to put their genital reproductive organ into a light socket or a horse's backside or another man's backside. Somehow that's normal and natural in your political correct right. No, I think that's mentally delusional and insane. And to you know, not to create a dichotomy here, but that's an example of, again, America's degeneracy. But this sort of classification of people who are affirming that this COVID-19 propaganda, avalanche of lies and exaggerations and really false reporting. These are criminal acts in my mind, of course, because you are reporting over the news networks. You are abusing your Federal Communications Commission license to be a TV channel and a news channel by propagandizing and falsely reporting to the American people things that are not true. The cases, the deaths, and all of this hysteria, as Ron Paul does a very good job at, is being used to drive governors into making tyrannical, authoritarian decisions and shutting down the constitutional rights of businesses, shutting down beaches, shutting down people's ability to travel, threatening federal, or state mandates for people to wear masks. All of this is preparation. The only way that they can succeed in that is if they remove everybody who defies that and defies that madness and hysteria, or even just questions it by saying, well, where's the proof? Where's the proof that you have this power? By what authority, as Don likes to say?
Right.
By what authority do you do this? By what law? By what constitutional edict are you doing these things that you think you can do? Because as far as I understand the Constitution in America, you don't have the right to tell us what to do and how to do this. And they can only get away with tyranny by labeling everybody mentally ill who questions it, and also ignoring the mentally ill and mentally violent and hysterical and confused Antifa, Black Lives Militia, all these other groups that are serving as the shock troops for this communist, Marxist, Antifa, leftist takeover of America, which could result in a massive breakup and civil war in this country that I think we're already in. Jim?
Nice. Very nice, Scott. I think you got it exactly right. Meanwhile, Biden, I am constantly tested for cognitive decline. Trump, not cognitively aware. How ridiculous can you get? In a press conference, Joe Biden, in an attempt to deflect criticism of his cognitive ability, said Trump doesn't seem to be cognitive aware of what's going on, as he either reads or gets briefed on important issues and he forgets it, or he doesn't think it's necessary, that he needs to know it. A reporter brought the question to Biden directly, noted some have speculated you're subject to some degree of cognitive decline. He asked whether Biden has been tested for some degree of cognitive decline. I've been tested and I'm constantly tested, Biden said in response. Look, all you got to do is watch me and I can hardly wait to compare my cognitive capability to the cognitive capability of the man I'm running against. Meanwhile, as new Rasmussen poll has revealed that 1 in 5 Democrat voters believe Biden has some form of dementia. Overall, 52% of voters believe it's an issue or at least a possibility. 48% disagree. 61% believe it's important enough he should address the issue publicly. These numbers are unsurprising given only a few days ago Biden claimed 120 million Americans, that's 1/3 of the US population, have died from the coronavirus pandemic, a gross over exaggeration. Trump tweeted, if I ever said something so mortifyingly stupid, the fake news media would come down on me with a vengeance. This is beyond a normal mistake. Why isn't the media reporting on it? Trump has published the results of his cognitive tests because he has nothing to hide. I think we'll be waiting a long time before Biden does that. Meanwhile, per his lawyer, Sidney Powell, General Flynn was targeted because he knew about the billions Brennan and company were running off the books. He was going to audit the intel agencies because he knew about the billions Brennan and company were running off the books, Powell said, referring to former CIA Director John Brennan. Powell began an interview noting when she took over the case, three things were very, very troubling and egregious. He was not properly informed of what the government had even disclosed to his defense lawyers prior to the plea. The government didn't disclose a fraction of what it should have disclosed. The whole case was made up. Meanwhile, another reason, of course, they had to get rid of Flynn, he knew that in 2012, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and John Brennan had made up ISIS to put pressure on the government, the democratically elected government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. They created a mercenary army to rape and to loot and to pillage and to murder and to eventually confront the Persian nation of Iran. It was a disgrace. So that Michael Flynn opposed its creation. He thought it was wrong, perfectly appropriately. And as a consequence, John Brennan recommended Barack Obama should fire him, which Obama obligingly did. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's telling. General Flynn, of course, blew the whistle on all of the financial shenanigans, which Obama and Eric Holder and John Brennan and many others at Covington and Burling did. And I reported it. I gave it to Sidney Powell. And what she's reporting is these are the billions, 19,000 bank accounts from Switzerland, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, that were being redirected, confiscated, watered down, used as bribes for ISIS, for ISIL, for the Clinton Foundation, for various other enrichment pay-to-play schemes Covington and Burling was a law firm that represented these Swiss banks. It was also the employer of Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer, Roger Zackheim, the son of Dov Zackheim. Covington and Burling also worked with Stuart Eisenstadt, Michael Chertoff. All of those people went in and met with General Flynn, Michael Chertoff's, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer. Loretta Lynch was part of all of this. This is what Sidney Powell learned. This is what Michael Flynn learned. And he saw it originally in the original report that we sent to General James Mattis and Lynn Halbrooks at the Pentagon Inspector General in September of 2012. And it was the Edward Snowden, Brad Birkenfeld UBS disclosures of terrorist financing. So this is what was coming out. This is why they targeted Flynn. This is why they fired Flynn, of course, is because he was drawing attention to this. General Mattis was fired shortly after that too. He's sort of been a coward and not mentioned any of this, but it was on his watch, and all of the documents are there. If Durham and Bill Barr thoroughly examine all of the exhibits and the documents and the letters from Shell Gabe and the book of exhibits, as well as interview Michael Isikoff and Tom Hamburger and many of these other partners, if they petition Snowden to testify via Skype or via televised presentation, as well as Brad Birkenfeld, all of this material would be manifest, and it will not only exonerate General Flynn, it will serve as the indictment of Obama, Michael Isikoff. It'll indict also Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, and Hillary Clinton. They were all in this conspiracy to create a racketeering operation.
Yep.
And it's because they were exposed that she said, if he gets elected, we'll all hang. Well, this is precisely what they will hang for, is their pay-to-play wheel of fortune that they were making the American government transform into, for them to personally enrich themselves using the American government, and also using the Justice Department to be weaponized against normal American citizens. So we have Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn. All of their cases need to be thrown out as fruit of the poisonous tree, because they never had constitutional authority to begin the Mueller probe, because the entire thing was based on political lies and calculation, and intentionally was designed to crumble the Trump administration from within. It was designed to be a rot that they would try to expand like termites in the wooden edifice of the Trump administration. But it's been discovered, and it now all needs to be prosecuted as such. Jim?
Yes, exactly right, Scott. Nice points. Meanwhile, breaking news, Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested in New Hampshire on sex trafficking and perjury charges, is going to appear in court. Arrested in New Hampshire last Thursday, reportedly facing charges from the Manhattan District Attorney, not been seen since last summer when Epstein was arrested. Dozens of women say she procured them for Epstein when they were underage or very young. They claim she facilitated his abuse of them for years and threatened them. She's always denied the allegation. She was his girlfriend in the 90s, but remained his friend for years. It was she who introduced him to Prince Andrew and to Virginia Roberts. She says she and the royal had sex when she was 17. That's Virginia Roberts in 2001. The FBI took her into custody Thursday. A grand jury returned a 6-count indictment against her. The charges are conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, enticement of a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and 2 counts of perjury. Meanwhile, it appears that Epstein was a Mossad agent used to blackmail American politicians, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was a Mossad operative as well. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, that's the intel that Mossad and Epstein do. They capture American political figures and other leaders and extort them for sexually compromising positions and video recordings. Honeypots are the typical counterintelligence reference for it. And the honeypots have caught Bill Clinton. They've caught Bill Gates. They've caught, and numerous others are named as riding the Lolita Express, the airplane that Epstein flew with underage girls in order to exercise them and all sorts of prostitution and sexual gratification of these men and women. And Hillary Clinton was on the plane as well. And Hillary Clinton and Chelsea went to the ranch in Texas. So this whole thing reeks of sickness and perversion. It touches upon the pedophile, Pizzagate research that you've exposed, Jim. Whether Giselle has been locked away since last summer. They may have known where she's at. They may have told her she's under a death sentence unless she gives up everybody and everything, which she may have done. This may be actually the termination of her case rather than the beginning, and they're just going through the theatrics. I cannot see anybody of character and responsibility allowing Epstein to kill himself or be killed for precisely the intelligence reasons that we exposed. It was one of the reasons that Renee Alexander Acosta, who was Trump's Secretary of Labor, had been in Florida. And this is important to always remember, Jim. Renee Alexander Acosta, when he was in Florida, he was a U.S. attorney. He prosecuted Epstein and gave him the sweetheart deal because he was told he belongs to intelligence. That means he belongs to Mossad. He belongs to CIA. And he's engaged in operations for us or with us or through us. And Renee Alexander Acosta also prosecuted Brad Birkenfeld, the UBS Swiss banker that came over from Geneva, Switzerland, when Ed Snowden was the CIA asset. The CIA had taken Birkenfeld, put him into a jail cell with a fake DUI, and then brought him over and then threw him in jail when he dumped the 19,000 bank accounts. Renee Alexander Acosta was responsible for that. And funny how he disappeared after we were talking about a lot of this last summer. So there's a lot of strangeness in a lot of this material. Epstein deserves to be, tortured and killed 1,000 deaths if all of this is true of what he did. And so does Ghislaine Maxwell. But how this is coming together, if there's a story within the story, if there's a plot that we're not aware of that is the real story, I guess time will tell. But the other thing is Assange. You know, Assange, if he really is rotting in a prison in Britain, then shame on Trump. Yep. And Assange's blood is on Trump's hands. Amen. Because Assange is one of the greatest whistleblowers, and I think deserves statues the size of the Empire State Building about him because of what he exposed that the American government was doing under George Bush and Barack Obama. And Assange should not be in a jail cell. He should not be rotting. He should be used for all of the intelligence that he has. But maybe that's the case. But as it seems right now, from what we're being shown and told, he is rotting in an English prison. And that is shameful upon Donald Trump and the Department of Justice, because it should not be. This whole notion of him conspiring with others to hack into U.S. systems and such, all of that is a bunch of nonsense. He was reporting on material that Bradley Manning had reported about war crimes and mission stuff. Granted, it was dicey and he shouldn't have reported a lot of the stuff in theater. What Snowden reported and what Assange and WikiLeaks collaborated with Snowden on is far more interesting, important, and beneficial to the American public. And that's why Assange and Snowden should be pardoned, and they should be used to download and give the president really the insights that no one else will give him. Jim?
Thank you, Scott. As a final thought, it seems to me that if the president can navigate us through this morass, all of these challenges to remain intact, the American people are going to judge no one better to rebuild the American economy than the man that took us to the most robust in American history, that he's going to be reelected handily in spite of it all. And under those circumstances, I think it would be very worthy of contemplation. His image be added to Mount Rushmore as well.
Yeah.
Don, I want you to take us out, my friend.
Yeah, putting Trump's image up there would really cause a heck of a lot of action in this country. So I don't know, but I think he needs to have a little bit more time to elapse and cool down. But yes, it is just quite a time, and this Maxwell Epstein thing is really something else, and that is a whole lot of people there, and the people getting on that Lolita Express include guys like Bill Gates and Chief Justice John Roberts and others. And so that might explain a few things that are happening in the Supreme Court even. But it's really something. So folks, it's been quite a show here today, here on July 6th. And I'm going to go back, I'm going to go back to Tahiti and enjoy the beach and just, but you got to stand up right now, folks. It's really it's something else. It's the situation we're in. So this is Truth versus News, Truth versus Official Facts here on July 6th. Thank you for watching. Please share everywhere because we're not on TV anymore. The Seattle audience is really hungering for some more action. They can't see me on TV no more, but we'll get it around the world, and that's where it needs to go. It makes this ubiquitous. God bless. Thank you so much. I think
that was.
This report is based on Amazing Polly's recent video, Is This Torture? In her video, Polly examines Amnesty International's 1973 report on torture and how it seems to reflect the current response to COVID-19. According to Amnesty International's report, torture is the systematic and deliberate infliction of acute pain in any form by one person on another in order to accomplish the purpose of the former against the will of the latter. The report then uses Biederman's chart of coercion to describe the technique. Psychologist Albert Biederman studied communist Chinese tactics known as DDD, debility, dependency, and dread. The CIA has been trained to use debility, dependency, and dread. And according to their 1983 Human Resource Exploitation Training Manual, many psychologists consider the threat of inducing debility to be more effective than debility itself. With DDD, the debilitated victim becomes dependent upon the torturer and develops a strong fear of anything vague or unknown. Biederman's chart of coercion lays out the design of DDD. Does any of this sound familiar? Number 1, isolation. We see this with quarantines and social distancing and the prohibition of crowds and large gatherings. Number 2, monopolization of perception. Corporate mainstream media has monopolized all of pop culture, and those on social media who challenge the mainstream narrative are censored. Also listed is restricted movement and monotonous food. Number 3, induced debilitation and exhaustion. Gym closures, church closures, losing your job, school closings, and wearing masks all day long increase stress and provokes exhaustion and debilitation. Number 4, threats. We are threatened that our own children may be taken away from our homes and that experimental forced vaccines are coming. We are told that more will die if we restart America. And we are threatened with tracking chips, contact tracing, and a new normal. Number 5, occasional indulgences. Here we find fluctuations of interrogators' attitudes, such as BLM protests are good, Trump rallies are bad. Walmart is okay, but small businesses are not. The torturer will provide occasional indulgences such as rewards for partial compliance. If you just wear a mask, someday we can return to normal. Number 6, demonstrating omnipotence and omniscience. Shutting down the entire global economy was a pretty good demonstration of omnipotence. Huge fines and jail for people not wearing a mask. We see the omniscience with Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, and other official experts. Number 7 is degradation, being called non-essential or a science denier, being treated as ignorant fools and called names by celebrities for not complying. Number 8, enforcing trivial demands. This final step develops habits of compliance. Enforcement of minute rules such as standing 6 feet apart, following arrows, and showing support for violent BLM protests. Also, according to the report on torture, many victims become ill as a result of coercion, and more than half the illnesses listed in the report can be easily diagnosed as COVID-19 according to CDC guidelines. Do you really think that this is all a coincidence? Or are the people of the world being subjected to an advanced form of torture, coercion, and mind control? For Infowars.com, this is Greg Reese.
Earlier this week, the state reported the death of a teenager in Cook County. Are you familiar with this case? If so, is this the state's first teenage death? And can you tell us if the teenager in question had underlying conditions?
Okay, we're going to get a definition now of how you can determine whether or not someone died with COVID. Very simple.
I don't have that information at my disposal at this time. I know we have had people of all age groups die. I just want to be clear in terms of the definition of people dying.
Okay, here comes the definition of death by COVID.
Of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis.
That means no matter how you die, as long as you were positive for COVID when you died, you are a COVID death. Even if you got in a car wreck or you fell off a cliff, for whatever reason that you died, as long as you had COVID, it's counted as a COVID death. Listen.
So that means that if you were in hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death.
There it was. Okay. She's going to make it more simple for us.
Means that if technically, even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death.
So technically, even if you died of an alternate cause, if you had COVID when you died, it's called a COVID death. You wonder why the numbers are messed up.
We, the citizens of America, are now joined in a great national effort to rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people. Together, we will determine the course of America and the world for many, many years to come. We will face challenges. We will confront hardships, but we will get the job done. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people. Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families. We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries, making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs. America will start winning again, winning like never before. At the bedrock of our politics will be a total allegiance to the United States of America. And through our loyalty to our country, we will rediscover our loyalty to each other. We must speak our minds openly, debate our disagreements honestly, but always pursue solidarity. Do not allow anyone to tell you that it cannot be done. No challenge can match the heart and fight and spirit of America.